everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. On this sad day, I'd like to begin with a poem that expresses thoughts about memory. And the poem reads, I'd like the memory of me to be a happy one. I'd like to leave an afterglow of smiles when life is done. I'd like to leave an echoing echo whispering softly down the ways of happy times and laughing times and bright and sunny days. I'd like the tears of those who grieve to dry before the sun, of happy memories that I leave when my life is done. We may not all know each other here today, but the person that brought us here together, the love, respect, and friendship for JR and his entire family, unite us as one. There's a question that cannot be answered that's on everybody's minds, and the question is why? Why was someone taken who was a lifelong partner to Michelle, a role model and loving father to Dylan and Ryan, a sibling who shared so many childhood memories with Kate and Mary, and a friend to so many more? And as one of the cards on the flower says, he was an all-around good guy. A member of the family said to me the other day that he was their rock. Everyone here is or is like family, but unfortunately all the fantastic memories of JR cannot fill the sense of loss that is felt. All that can be done is to continue to tell stories about him and to continue to move forward together as the family that he was so proud to be the rock of. Today we will hear impressions, stories, and tributes about the rock that JR was. And I would like to start those tributes by calling up his sister, Kate Matthews, to share her memories.
Thank you all for coming. I'm JR's sister Kate, his older sister. Like I like to remind him, not his old sister. I was sitting at the computer in the hotel lobby yesterday morning, typing this up, and thinking, you know, if I just had more time to prepare, this would have been better. And then I thought how silly that was. How can anyone ever prepare for something like this? We can never prepare for something like this. So I'm just going to share with you a few stories about JR from his childhood, from when we grew up in Montague, a rural town. Many of you know JR after he grew up, became a young adult, college age, older, but Mary, his sister, and I can share the dirt. So, as I said, some of you here may know that we grew up in a rural area. And our playground was the woods, it was fields, it was streams. And we lived in a town where no one really knew where the property lines were. There were no lines, fences. We just played. In summers, time was something we always had. And we and the other kids in the area would often get together to wander and explore for hours on end. There were no cell phones to keep track of us. Our parents usually had no idea where we were. But as long as we showed up home in time for dinner, everything was okay. There were 2 times in our young lives where JR and I thought we'd possibly killed each other. The first was when he was around 9 or 10, and I was around 11. And being that close in age, we were, of course, very competitive with one another. And one of our roamings with a few of the local kids, we came up on the side of a hill that had been partially dug out for fill dirt So it was sheer. But you could still see some potential places to grab, some toe holds, and of course young kids looking at a challenge. We stood there, we stared at it, we thought all about trying to climb it, but none of us moved toward it until JR and I challenged each other to do it. He took on the challenge and began climbing, only to fall from a height of about 6 feet and land on his back. It knocked the air out of him. About 5 of us gathered around him, watching intently as he lay there on the ground, not knowing what was happening, panicking, uncertain, what should we do? And I remember thinking, how am I ever going to explain to Mom and Dad that I killed JR? But he got better, and we got home in time for dinner, and all was well. About 2 years later, he was annoying me for about the 1000th time, which was usual. And because he was younger than I was at that time, girls mature faster than boys, I was a little taller than he was. I was a little quicker, a little more coordinated. I like to think a lot more coordinated. And that meant he would run from me if I got mad, because he knew it was coming. But on that particular day, everything changed. His final taunt that afternoon went too far. I started chasing him around the dining room table. And as I closed in on my prey, he panicked. He turned. He grabbed my arm, and suddenly and shockingly to both of us, I was airborne. My body slammed into the side of the living room ottoman. I fell to the floor. I was gagging. I was gasping. JR did not help me. Instead, he ran into the laundry room where our mom was. He was screaming, "Mom, Mom, help! I just killed Kate." Mom, frantic, rushed, came in, looked at me, and a look came across her face that we had both seen before. She turned to JR. "Kate just had the wind knocked out of her. She's fine. Stop roughhousing in here. Take it outside." And back to the laundry room she went. I looked at JR and saw a knowing smile slowly spread across his face. "I'm bigger than you now." He smirked. "Ha, it's payback time." And from that moment on, our relationship changed forever. But in high school football, when he played tight end, he realized he still needed to be nice to me, at least occasionally. After all, someone had to throw the football to him so he could practice running his plays. And unbeknownst to me, I threw a perfect spiral. I didn't know much of anything about football. I just did what he told me to do. And JR's passes were a little wobbly, and I asked him why mine weren't. And he told me, he said, "You have small hands, so they grip the laces better. It's easier to throw a spiral if you have small hands. It's harder for me because I have bigger hands." And I shrugged and never questioned the logic. Okay, fine. 20 years later, we were at a restaurant, and the topic came up, and he started to laugh. I didn't know why. I was, "Why are you laughing?" "I can't believe you still believe that," he said. I said, "Believe what?" "The spiral thing." "What do you mean?" He was laughing so hard at this point that his body was shaking. He said, "I was just jealous of you because you threw a better spiral than I did, so I made that up. It was a bunch of crap." So for over 20 years, I believed his explanation without question. Even though he was much bigger than me by then, I swear, had we not been in a restaurant, I would definitely still have chased him around that table. And time slipped by. We got older. We went away to college. We became grown-ups. With all the responsibilities that brings. JR, Mary, and I, we all got married. We had our families. Seasons changed. Years slipped away. Decades passed. And then we arrived here, to this moment we still cannot fully comprehend. JR, we are so incredibly thankful for your life. You are a loving and a faithful husband, a remarkable father of 2 beautiful and amazing boys, a loyal friend to so many, and the best brother 2 sisters could ever hope for. We mourn your loss in ways that words simply cannot describe. But we celebrate your life and the legacy of love that you left us. You are not gone. You never will be. You are transformed. And we know that the shining strength of your spirit will always be alive within our hearts. For love will always be greater than death. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Next, to share her memories, I would like to call up JR's sister, Mary.
Thank you all for being here. Celebrate. It's a celebration of his life, who he was, who he is, who he always will be. I do have dirt on JR. A little bit, actually, but I'm not as eloquent. I'm not the speaker. I'm more the behind-the-scenes kind of person. But one of the first things I remember, well, there's a lot of things, but one of the first comical things I remember is, again, growing up in the country. Lots of dirt, lots of animals, lots of critters. We always had cats, dogs. And we had our cats. I had Rainbow and he had Charles, who we called Feebob. And his bedroom window opened up onto the roof. And the roof, there was a catalpa branch over it. So Feebob would climb the tree, out the branch, jump onto the roof, and sit outside JR's window and say, "Wow," until they let him in. And generally you could tell by the meow, and anyone who has a cat knows this, there's a different meow if there's something in their mouth. Okay? On a regular basis, I would wake up in the morning and find a dead mouse hanging over my bed, taped by my loving brother. I woke up to mice, I woke up to snakes, I woke up to all that. And it wasn't like a one-time thing, it was a regular occurrence. To the point that I stopped waking up and looking up, I would get up this way and then look and see if it was safe. So that was definitely JRism. To continue with the I killed my sibling. Once, I thought I killed him because he was teaching me how to throw a Frisbee properly. Because I did not throw a perfect spiral, I could barely throw anything. So he's teaching me how to throw a Frisbee. So he is probably about 3 feet away and tells me how to throw the Frisbee. Like, okay, like this, as hard as I could, right into the bridge of his nose. Boom, on his back. Blood. Okay, same thing. Mom, I think I just killed JR. Obviously he was fine. And it was, I'm glad you were outside. And then there was the boogeyman. Again, growing up in the country, anybody who grew up in the country knows that there are monsters in the fields. It's common when you grow up that there's monsters in the fields. And the monsters chase you. So we would always play in the fields all around. And my aunt and uncle lived next to us. And we all went, my sister and I, and my mom used to bake all the time. We liked to bake cookies. Any of you who are college friends of JR's, you're welcome. The cookies came from us. So I went over, I was elected, I'm just going to use that word, I was elected to go over to Aunt Connie and get the sugar, the butter, the flour, whatever it was that we needed. Of course, it's pitch black. So I go across the field. I think this is why I started running track. So I would go as fast as I could across the field. I would knock on the half door and she would give me whatever we needed, and I would run as fast as I could back. So I'm running as fast as I can across the field, and the monster steps out from behind the tree. Mind you, the monster is JR. But he couldn't say boo because he was laughing so hysterically, because I was so uncoordinated and such a dork that I was just all legs and arms everywhere. All he could do was fall out from behind the tree laughing, which was enough to terrify me, which is probably also the impetus to get me to start doing long jump, because that's what I did. I went flying, except in long jump, you're not supposed to land on your chest. I landed on my chest with an apple under the apple tree right here. So of course, I couldn't breathe, and I'm like, so what happens? He goes running into Mom. I just killed Mary. So we all have our killing our siblings stories. But again, we grew up, we got older, we constantly tormented each other. Sometimes we had help. Sometimes we ganged up on him together. Sometimes they ganged up on me. It worked. And we grew up a little bit. And we started dating in our families, and my husband Frank and I had been dating for a couple months maybe. And it's the first time JR meets him. Come on, Frank, let's go for a ride. He had a Jeep, gets to the Jeep, drives down the road, locks the windows, and we all know what happened. That was Frank's introduction to the family. So he came back and said, you know what JR did to me? I was like, I know exactly what JR did to you, because that's what he does to us all the time. You guys know that. I'm sure he did it to you on a regular basis. So that was Frank's introduction to the family. And Frank's like, I think I like this family. I'm going to stick around. And I was able to see him 2 years ago, May of 2019. He was inducted into the Section 9 Hall of Fame for track and field. And so he called me and said, can you go? Do you want to go with me? I'm like, sure. It was up in Middletown, so we met. We're sitting at the dinner right before the award ceremony starts. And he leans over to me and says, by the way, you're supposed to introduce me and say a few words. I looked at him, I'm like, Dork, are you serious? That was Dorkmeister, that was our word for him. I'm like, are you serious? He's like, yeah, I kind of forgot to tell you that part. I'm like, yeah, you did. But it worked. I just got up and I kind of winged it. I talked about how, we all kind of got involved in track. There was a time that all three of the Quinns had a record at the high school for track. Yours was the 4x4, right? The relay. JR's was discus and mine was high jump. So all three of us had a record at the high school at the same time. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame, and even then, he's there in the lobby of the facility showing three kids how to throw the discus. In a suit and tie, standing there, showing them form, actually took out and drew out a circle on the floor, what the discus circle would be. That's who he was. That's who he is. He gives of himself. He loves. He teaches. He is Superman. We always thought he's Superman. And he always will be. What he left behind are amazing, amazing boys. And you guys both look just like him. He's a wonderful, wonderful man. He was a blessing to everyone he met. To everyone he met, he was a blessing. Always a smile. Always a helping hand. That was Sharon. That is JR. So I'm going to leave with a poem. I have to, but I'm only going to sing one. Nothing gold can stay. Robert Frost, family favorite. Nature's first green is gold, its hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf is a flower, but only for an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf. In Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day. Nothing gold can stay. Death is nothing at all. It's a blink. He's still here. His spirit is here. His memory is here. His love is here. We don't see him, but we feel him. And we know that he is in every single one of us. The memory will live on forever. The love will never die. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mary. As both of you were talking, I thought of a poem to read as well. It's by Margaret Mead, and it reads, "Remember me in your heart, your thoughts, your memories of the times we've loved, the times we laughed, the times we fought, and the times we cried. For if you always think of me, I will never be gone." Next, I would like to call up Ryan to share his thoughts about his father.
These past three days have been the worst days of my life. Every second of the day, I just sit there and think, wow, my best friend of 16 years is really gone. That morning I wake up, I walk down the hall and I expect to hear, "Here comes lazy ass out of his cave," or "Here comes happy," as he liked to call me sarcastically, but instead hear the worst 6 words of my life. Ryan called 911, Dad passed out. At that very moment, my heart sank. When the news broke, I couldn't believe it. I thought this must be a dream. I was waiting for him to walk through the door and say, "Just kidding, it's just a joke." But, that day, so many people asked me, "Is there anything I can do for you?" And, like anyone says, I'm fine, but in my head, I'm thinking, I just want my dad back. It's the only thing I want. And every single person right here would agree he treated everyone like family. There wasn't anyone he wasn't nice to. Our family, my friends, his friends, the neighbors, just any person you can think of. He was the kindest, most selfless person I've ever met in my life. He would sacrifice his free time for other people, especially me. Just to name a few things, instead of relaxing at home, having a beer and watching the shitty Eagles, he'd wake up at 7 a.m. and schlep out to the middle of nowhere to watch me strike out on all 5 at-bats. Or he'd come watch my rec basketball games where my shot would be blocked every time by some 23-year-old that claimed to be in middle school. In his head, he's like, "Wow, this kid really sucks at sports." But he wouldn't say it. He wouldn't. He was one of those people that that are funny, but they just don't know it. And I'm thinking back to earlier this year when I come home from a friend's house, and he's having a bowl of ice cream in his lap, just, eating the whole thing like he does. And I'd say to him, "Come on, fatty, let's put the ice cream down and lose the weight you say you want to lose." And he'd say, "Shut up." And then the following week I come home again, and this time he doesn't have the ice cream bowl. So I'm thinking, wow, he actually listened this time. And until I walk into the family room and see ice cream filled to the absolute top in a red Solo cup, so you make me think it's water. I give up an arm and a leg just to see him give me the look he gave me when my brother would walk out wearing clothes 10 sizes too small, and him like, "What the fuck is this guy wearing?" And then Dylan would proceed to make fun of him for wearing cargo shorts with the giant pockets, and he made fun of him so much to the point that my dad stopped wearing them. I mean, the noises he would make, not even a caveman would understand the sounds that he would make. He would do it, he would take this toilet paper roll and get my dog running all over the house, and I was just like, oh my God, I don't know what the hell is coming out of his mouth. Or one of my personal favorites, Michelle Wine, God's Green Earth, you need all these clothes for one night. I could stand up here for hours and hours talking about all the memories we've shared and all the things he did. There isn't anything in the world I wouldn't give up to have him back right now. I don't think I'd even be able to get out of my bed if it wasn't for my friends and family being so supportive of me. And I want to thank everyone for that. These past few days really made me realize how important the people you love are. And there's just one last thing I want to say to everyone. Never take anyone, anything, or anyone for granted. Doesn't matter if it's your friends, your family, your neighbors, or anyone you love. Tomorrow's never promised. One day everything can be fine like it was for me, and the next morning you're sitting in a hospital room speechless. Dad, I love you. I promise to be strong and be there for Mom and Dylan. I'm not going to give up on anything or school or any of that stuff. You wouldn't want to see me suffer. You wouldn't want to be like that. You're in a better place now. I love you. I love you.
Thank you, Ryan. Next, I would like to call up JR's sister-in-law and brother-in-law, Amy and Brian Katz.
First, on behalf of our entire family, the Katzes, the Rushers, the Gellers, Michelle, Dylan, Ryan, and JR's two sisters, Mary and Kate, and their families, I want to thank you for joining us today to pay tribute and honor the most humble, giving, selfless, and sincere person I've ever known. Most of all, JR would be so incredibly thankful and appreciative for all the love and support in this room. Amy and I are going to try to get through this, but I ask that you bear with us because it's not likely to be very smooth, nor do we have any misconceptions that our words will ever measure up to who JR is as a man, a husband, a father, a son-in-law, a brother-in-law, an uncle, and my closest friend. You have to understand that without JR and Michelle, Amy and I would have never met, and we wouldn't have our family. I also wouldn't have my extended family. And as much as I've bantered, bickered, and openly expressed my sincere desire to never step foot on the island of Aruba again, our family is everything to me, and I will treasure every memory that he and I shared on that island. It's a bit cliche to say that tragedies like this are a reminder of what's truly important, but I'm going to say it anyway. Over the last few days, as we've all tried to make sense of this, the guys have been forwarding all sorts of pictures of JR. Photos of our last golf trip together, which was just this last May. A picture of him playing freshman football at Delaware when he still had abs. The last one was a group shot of us all in Dewey Beach, with a caption that spoke to how young we all looked and how much we took those times for granted. We were young and we were invincible. None of us had more than $5 in our pocket, and we knew absolutely nothing about life other than how to drink, can dance, and sit on the beach. We thought we had all the time in the world. And what we've come to realize is that time is the most valuable thing we all have, until we don't. It's the real lesson of all this. It's the one thing we can't buy more of. It doesn't matter how much money you have or how much power you have. I spent the last 30 years of my life with him, and it wasn't enough. No one knows why things like this happen to people like JR. There's no way to get it in your head, no way to get it around your head, and we're not going to try. What we are going to try to do is give you a few things to remember him by. For those of you who didn't know him very well, we're going to try to spend a few minutes telling you about this incredible man. For those of us who are fortunate to be part of his life and in his inner circle, we're going to try to share some funny stories which we hope will provide you some warm feelings and a few smiles to take home with you and to remember him during better times.
How do you even begin to characterize this amazing and loving human being? JR is larger than life, literally and figuratively. I thought my dad was the tallest man I ever knew until I met JR. JR was our gentle giant. He was the kindest, most loving, caring individual that I've ever met. JR had no idea what he was getting into when he married into our Jewish family. It all started when JR took Michelle out on their first date and he refused to valet the car. He said it cost $10 and he didn't want to pay it. I think Michelle almost walked out on the date, but that was pretty short-lived, and JR got the hang of it pretty quickly, mainly through Brian and my dad indoctrinating JR on an easy and quick method of the stooping lesson. A 10 here, a 5 here, it gets you a lot further, JR. The funny part is, JR never really adapted to that methodology. He didn't need to ask people to do things for himself. He enjoyed the heavy lift of doing things for himself and his family and for all of his friends. He derived pleasure out of all of those things. JR was the kind of guy we all counted on. Even the messiest of tasks. I will never forget my daughter's bat mitzvah. I maybe had 1, 2, 3 extra cocktails, and JR was the one. JR was the one who literally lifted me out of the limousine and carried me into bed and made sure that I was okay. JR was our toolkit Tom. He was our house doctor. Brian and I loved when JR would come and visit. I can still hear his voice in my head. Aim, I got it. JR got right to the honey-do list, which Brian could never do. With what started as a simple light bulb change would turn into computer fixes, checking air pressure in my tires, putting together cribs, baby swings, dishwashers, repairing about anything. There was no job too big or too small for JR. I remember this so well.
JR was laughing after inspecting the car seat that Brian had just installed for Drew, my oldest daughter. He immediately removed it and reinstalled it. He said it didn't pass the inspection. I'm sure the fire department would have loved to hire him for car safety and inspections because he did it with a smile. And again, he just always loved to help people. I have so many favorite memories of JR, but some of my favorite were the trips to New Jersey, Aruba, and the precious times in Margate where we could all be together when the kids were young. You never had to ask. The moment we would arrive in New Jersey, JR was waiting for us in the driveway. He would grab our suitcases, wrap his huge arms around all of my kids, and when he was little, he would give them a throw in the air. I could still hear their belly laughs. He would call my youngest daughter Peanut, and she would call him Uncle Peanut, and I can still hear his voice saying that. JR always knew what to do. Sleeping arrangements were handled, air mattresses were inflated, blankets were organized, sheets were military tight, and who could deny his perfect pancakes? They weren't shaped into circles, but he took the time to make every kid a pancake in their initials. And the best part is he had a special way of putting the chocolate chips strategically on top, but never in the batter. He told me that was his special way of doing it because the batter was just too heavy if you put the chocolate chips directly in it. It was also about the cleanup. JR had a methodical way of cleaning the kitchen. He wanted your help, but not really. JR could put anyone to shame. He could scrub a kitchen countertop, clean like no other. I once asked JR jokingly how it was he never got any of those countertop streaks, and he shared with me his methodology. He was so detailed, he was so precise, and he was so organized. It didn't stop with the pancakes. While in Margate, JR was the one who loaded up our wagon on the beach. He double-checked that all the beach equipment was in tow, and when Michelle complained that she was carrying too much, he always made sure his Pokey, his nickname for Michelle, was taken care of. Each beach towel was securely placed in the chair so they wouldn't blow away. And then when it came time, the giant forts, the holes, the sand castles, the shovels, and making sure the kids were safe in the ocean and hosing down the beach chairs after we returned was always done by JR. And not to mention, he's the only person that followed Sue's recycling rules in Margate. He would take all the plastic out once we put it in and he would rearrange it. That's the thing. Again, he loved to take care of us.
Well, everything Amy said is true. God knows he saved me from thousands of honeydews that I'm totally ill-equipped to handle. Let's not forget that JR had a few quirks that made him a bit unique and made us all laugh. So I'm going to try to share a few with you. So anyone who ever played golf with JR knows that he took forever to hit a freaking golf ball. We pleasantly refer to this as JR davening over the ball. And we'd all stand behind him and take bets as to which way he'd shank his 300-yard drive after staring at it for 5 minutes. And no matter which way it went, you'd hear this inevitable groan as he wailed into the ball. It literally sounded like he was tackling a running back. And we all know his infamous nickname for Michelle was Pokey, for how long she takes to get ready and out of the house. What most people don't know is that it was actually a cover for him. Some people would call him methodical and precise, and the rest of us would call him ridiculously slow. And if you were ever in a hurry and went upstairs to check on him, you could see him taking the extra time to comb his hair and cover the bald spots that were starting to come in. You can only imagine how much fun it was for me when I caught him and teased him, and he looked at me deadpan, calmly remind me that he could snap my neck at any moment. But we both knew that he never would. And over the last couple of years, Michelle's been complaining that JR can't see a damn thing. He can't hear anything and he repeats himself. Now, I can vouch for Michelle that he tells the same damn stories over and over again. Usually it's repeating a Tucker Carlson episode. And when in a restaurant, he cannot see the menu, but he refused to wear his glasses. But as for the hearing, Michelle, let's just say that every time she'd yell at him, he'd glance over me and he'd wince, but he'd also smile. After all these years, this large, athletic beast of a man was no match for Michelle, and there was no way he was ever going to engage. Now, our families love to torture and tease, but JR would never dare do it to Michelle. He was afraid, which is where I stepped in, not knowing many boundaries. It was up to me to torture Michelle in an all-out effort to get JR to smile and laugh. Michelle's been thrown in giant crab pots. She's been wedgied in the halls of the Marriott Aruba countless times. She's been run over by golf carts and chased up countless driveways with our SUV. JR's expression of utter delight made it all worthwhile. I'll always remember those laughs and JR shaking his head, wondering why he couldn't have the balls to do it. So I met JR in the late 80s, along with a crew of guys that are in the back of this room, and they became our inner circle. We came from all walks of life and immediately bonded. To this day, it's hard to understand why it happened or how it happened. We were neither rich nor poor. We weren't overly bright, except for Phil, and we only let him in because of Hillary. Some of the guys went to high school together, and some of us worked together. JR's connection was Delaware, where we met Rob and Donnie. It didn't really matter where your connection came from. Once one of the guys vouched for you, you were in. You were in 10 Bayside, and you were one of us. And JR was more than just one of us. He was one of our leaders, and he became the glue that kept us all together then and now. And over the last 25 years, we've all spread out and had families of our own, and JR and I became really close. At first, for obvious reasons, as our two families had kids that were similar in ages, and we spent countless times at the beach or family vacations. Now, you could never meet two more polar opposite people than me and JR, and in part, that's why it worked. I tried to teach him about wine and cigars, and he tried to teach me about tubing and climbing. We each sucked at what the other did well. We talked all the time. And over the years, we started to really bond over all of our past experiences. And when something good or bad happened, or we just needed to vent, we spoke. And every time he called me, he opened with, "Kat, my brother." And every time I called him, I opened with Quinn, my brother. You see, I just didn't lose my brother-in-law. I lost my brother. We used to joke around on family vacations how lucky we were to have each other, and there would be no way that we would ever put up with anybody else. Somehow that conversation turned into the dreaded what-if scenario. And we made a pact that if something happened to either of us, the other would step in. It wasn't written in stone, nor did we ever talk about it with anyone. It just became this unspoken and unbreakable pact. I just never thought it would happen so soon. We just ran out of time. Michelle, Dylan, Ryan, the pact that JR and I have is unbreakable, as is the love that our families share. And while the road isn't going to be easy, you have to know that no matter what, we got you. We all love the three of you very, very much. Rest easy, my brother. We got this.
And to share his memories of his son-in-law, I'd like to call up David.
hard to follow that eloquence. Thank you. You guys were terrific. Thank you all for being here. Can't possibly comprehend this outpouring of love, compassion, caring for that guy. What I'm going to say is probably to a great extent redundant, but I'm just going to kind of capsulize it from a father-in-law's perspective and just make a few comments. I can't see and I can't hear. Hard for me to walk, but I know we've got a bunch of people on Zoom, and I thank those folks too. Today's the most difficult day of our family's lives. We say goodbye to my son-in-law, my daughter's husband, the father of his two precious sons, and a brother to his two wonderful sisters. Every fiber of our family is torn. He was taken from us much too early, suddenly, with no chance to say goodbye. We're so cheated. Perhaps some of you remember a charming little fable written by Shel Silverstein in the 70s called The Missing Piece. The book is about a circular, animal-like creature that is missing a wedge-shaped piece of itself. I read that book over and over again to my little children, and they so enjoyed that story. That circular creature never really found the piece that fit, and neither will we. Losing JR is just tantamount to losing my son. Almost from the day he married Michelle, my precious daughter, our entire family embraced, respected, and loved him dearly more each day. Everybody has shared how much he'll be missed. It just seems trite to say it over and over and over again, but I can't say it too much. He was in true sense the mortar between the brick. He's the guy who everybody wanted in their foxhole. JR was a guy's guy. He was loved and admired by all of his friends, all of his co-workers. And thank you, you Wyford folks who have shown up here today. And everybody that was loved, he was loved and admired by all of his friends and everybody that was part of his existence. He was such an integral part of our day-to-day lives. JR was my go-to, as Brian said, for just about everything. Every issue that came down the pike. He was my general repair contractor, my telephone organizer, my computer guru, my business chat line guy. And as Brian said, the slowest golfer on the planet. But more than anything, he was my heart and soul. He was my friend. Excellence was his mantra. To him, it wasn't a skill, but an attitude. He always emphasized that having a good day was your own choice. He had a wonderful philosophy, and he exemplified thoughts on how to live his life. To do better, to try harder, to never give up, to think positively, to embrace respect and show loyalty, to be organized, and to be caring and compassionate. Some would think his only deficiency were his political leanings, which were probably a little right of Attila the Hun. He was in many respects an ideal for which we all strive. A gentle soul, pure of heart, and a great sensitivity for the world around him. He had a way with people that made him comfortable and infected others to gravitate toward him. JR exuded kindness and generosity to everybody that crossed his path. He was so damn patient, especially with my daughter. Sanity. And most of all, an amazing father to my two precious grandchildren. How is it possible to conclude this tribute? I could literally write it in an epistle. JR was truly our family rock. We have a mountain to traverse, and the road is going to be steep. He would tell us to go one step at a time, and we'll ultimately reach the summit. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Sleep well, my sweet prince. I love you.
For all beautiful words of tribute. And one thing I've always noticed in my profession, that when you hear people laughing, you hear people crying, that's a sign that somebody really touched your soul deeply. To have those kind of emotions at the worst time of your life, to be able to laugh and think about those great memories. And the memories that we have of JR are what will keep us going. And there's a poem that speaks to those memories. And the poem says, at the rising of the sun and at its going down, we'll remember JR. At the blowing of the wind and the chill of winter, we'll remember an amazing husband. At the opening of the buds and the rebirth of spring, we'll remember a precious father. At the blueness of the skies and the warmth of summer, we'll remember an incredible brother. At the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we'll remember a loyal and tremendous friend. At the beginning of the year and when it ends, we will remember JR. As long as we live, he too will live, for he is now a part of us, as we will always remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, when we are lost and sick at heart, when we have joy we crave to share, when we have decisions that are difficult to make, when we have achievements that are based on his, we will remember him. As long as we live, he too will live, for he is now and will always be a part of us, as today and always we remember him. I'd like to ask if you can all please take a moment of silence to remember JR and how he touched your life. I'd like to ask if we could all please rise for a memorial prayer. O God, full of compassion, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence unto the soul of J.R. Quinn, who is gone to his eternal home. Remember all the worthy and righteous deeds that he performed in the land of the living, and may his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. As together we say, Amen. And you may be seated. The burial is going to be private, but we've been asked to announce that anyone who would like to make contributions in JR's memory, to please make them to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital.
We have the folders, please. Yes, we can always once more, please. You can see it, please. Ladies and gentlemen, I would ask you to come and remain seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, please feel free to talk in our lobby after the service, but also please be aware that people need to get through the doorway to get to their cars and leave the chapel, so please step off to the side where the doorway is left clear. Thank you.
Well, it's a puppy now.